Welcome to the 2020 New Testament Challenge. Today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 14. This chapter has caused a lot of problems because it deals with tongues and prophecy. Here in chapter 14, Paul is giving us instruction on how to deal with worship within the church and the gifts that God gives. In the army, there are bugle calls that tell the soldiers what to do. Bugle calls bring order, they bring direction, and they bring understanding. The notes that a bugler plays have to be clear, strong, and understandable. On the battlefield, clarity is everything because it will mean victory or it'll mean defeat. Can you imagine a bugler, instead of giving the call for charge, he gives retreat instead? Or instead of mail call, it's the mess call. When a bugler plays those notes, it gives a message to those that are listening, those soldiers that are in the midst of battle. And again, those notes have to be clear, strong, and concise. There are 25 basic bugle calls within the army. Each one has specific meaning. Paul is saying here in chapter 14 that God has given gifts for clarity and for understanding as well, and for order. In chapter 14, verse 8, this is what Paul says. If a trumpet does not sound a clear call, who will get ready for battle? So it is with you. Unless you speak intelligible words with your tongue, how will anyone know what you are saying? You will be speaking into the air. So Paul is saying again and again throughout this chapter that clarity and understanding are key. Now, the gifts of prophecy and tongues are given by God. All spiritual gifts are given by God, but there's a purpose behind it. To build up the church, to strengthen the church, to make the church more effective. That's why the gifts are given. In verses 2 through 4, Paul is giving a distinction between tongues and prophecy. Listen to what he says. Verse 2. Anyone who speaks in a tongue does not speak to men, but to God. Indeed, no one understands him. He utters mysteries with his spirit. But everyone who prophesies speaks to men for their strengthening, encouragement, and comfort. He who speaks with a tongue edifies himself, but he who prophesies edifies the church. I would rather every one of you speak in tongues, Paul says, but I would rather have you prophesy. He who prophesies is greater than the one who speaks in tongues, unless he interprets, so that the church may be edified. Paul is saying in chapter 14 that the gifts, as they're operating, must be done in order. The distinction is that tongues must have an interpretation. There must be order, not chaos. And in fact, verse 33 says God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. So the rule as you read chapter 14 is that if there's no interpreter, then no one should speak. If someone does speak, only 2 or 3, and there must be an interpreter. Why? Because Paul is saying that understanding and clarity is the most important thing of all. If there's no understanding, then there is no edification. If there's no understanding, there is no encouragement. If there's no understanding, no one is built up. So Paul is saying that God gives gifts, and these gifts are given by God, but they are given with a purpose, and they are given for order as well. As you read through chapter 14, listen to God and do what he says. Thank you for joining the 2020 New Testament Challenge.